We are here with Todd Eilers, who is the founder and CEO of Eilers and Krejcik Gaming, which in its relatively short history has already become the standard for data and research in gaming technology and emerging forms of wagering. We can't have any conversation today that doesn't start with COVID-19. From your vantage point, how do you see COVID-19 and its effect on gaming suppliers working out in the near and midterm?
Sure. Well, as always, Frank, thanks for having me on the one-on-one interviews. Really appreciate it, and really appreciate our business relationship over the years. You're right. Obviously, the COVID pandemic and industry shutdown has impacted everyone, gaming suppliers for sure, and in particular, gaming suppliers that are 100% tied to land-based casinos. Obviously fared the worst. So, we're a data-driven market research firm, so we tend to always cite or reference data in how we kind of talk about the industry. So for 2020 right now, we're currently projecting about a 50% drop in slot machine sales. And that was off a relatively healthy and strong 2019, and would be the biggest drop that we've seen in the industry, I think, since we've been covering it, and frankly, probably since the industry started. So pretty significant. But that being said, all of the major suppliers and the vast majority of the other suppliers have all navigated their way through the industry shutdown. I do think we're on the back end of that and starting to emerge. We have now about 90% of casinos in the U.S. are open for business. Revenue trends for the casinos are I think most would say better than anticipated going into the shutdown and coming out of it. And so I do think that bodes well for suppliers going forward in terms of a recovery. That being said, I do think you'll see suppliers are definitely on a longer recovery path than casinos and other industries might be, just because of the CapEx nature of the business. You do need operators to feel comfortable enough to spend money, like they were before. And while business might be somewhat better than expected and improving, there's still a lot of uncertainty out there. And so that still will have somewhat of an impact in the second half of this year, and likely even probably next year as well. But I do think we hit bottom in the second quarter, and you definitely will see sequential growth going forward in terms of slot machine sales.
We spoke with Steve Sutherland of Konami in his CEO one-on-one, and Steve said he sees 18 to 24 months before casinos resume normal allocation of funds towards things like slot machines. One trend that we've seen for a long time now is the number of slot machines on casino floors has been reduced. And we've heard some casino operators say, COVID has shown them that there can be and should be further reductions. Do you think that the reductions some portion of them are permanent, and that the gaming equipment companies will be needing to diversify their businesses to maintain growth?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. We kind of saw this trend coming out of the Great Recession as well. Operators in highly competitive markets, we did see some reduction in the total number of units in those markets and by those operators. By and large, it was mostly on the commercial casino side. but when you kind of look at it in the broader perspective, adding in the tribal market, which is in many cases, most of those casinos are not in highly competitive markets, as well as the emergence of legal route markets like Illinois. You actually, the overall install base, while the commercial side might have declined a little bit coming out of the Great Recession, what you did see was the tribal markets and the route markets kind of more than offset that. And so, but your point is valid in terms of, in some cases, yes, there's probably too many slot machines. And I think what you've seen over the last several years is operators, move away from the long banks of slot machines and go to more pods and in different layouts on the casino floor to open up the floor. And I think what they had found is, and we track this because we saw a recovery in slot revenue, but not a recovery necessarily in the number of slots in the market. And what our hypothesis on that, and we've also talked to operators as well, but our view is that, operators were forced to kind of rethink things, and they did remove slots. And what they found out was they didn't necessarily need as many as they had before. So I do think you're probably seeing the same thing again right now with the COVID shutdown. Operators are removing some units. It's not a large number of units, but they are removing some. And I do think, again, in a lot of cases, some of those will be permanent. But you also do still see growth outside of those highly competitive markets. So, in our view, I mean, we track the number of slots and tables. Through the second quarter, we've seen a reduction of only about 1% of the total number of slot machines in North America, or US and Canada. So that's the equivalent of about 10 to 12,000 slots removed. We'll see how that looks throughout the rest of the year, but I wouldn't anticipate it getting much worse from that. So I do think there's a little bit of it, but I don't think it's going to be a big driver.
You've mentioned that your firm is data driven, and you've several times in our brief discussion have talked about tracking. And what we know is that casino managers, casino operators are going to go for performance. They're going to go with what makes money for them. And you've developed a unique tool and suite of products to do exactly that. And it's a product that we co-brand with you, which is the Eilers-Fantini game performance database. Can you describe this tool, what it does, and how the clients using it, clients who have it, have been using it?
Sure. Well, we're really excited about this product. It's the largest repository of game performance data in the world. We're tracking about 250,000 slot machines. It's been a lot of fun launching, and we're seeing some really interesting things. By and large, the biggest benefits for casino operators is you don't know what you don't know, right? And so, even the best operators out there still want access to external market intelligence to benchmark their casino operations. And we've got so many data points in so many different markets that there's a wealth of information out there for operators to kind of dig into and compare their casinos to their competitive set. What we've found in a lot of cases is that there are several top performing games in certain markets that a lot of operators simply don't have. So one of the easiest things is for operators to pull up a top performing games ranking for their market, and they can compare their own casino and they can take a look at in many cases there's 2 or 3 games that they don't have that are top performers at their competitor properties. And so that's an easy benefit, but there's really a lot more to it in terms of tracking the life cycle of slot cabinets and game themes, and deciding, when to swap out a game theme in a cabinet, when you should maybe start to think about the end of life of a slot cabinet. So there's really a lot of tools and a lot of information there available for operators to use.
One thing we see coming out of COVID is that, technology changes. And what we used to call slot machine companies are really gaming technology companies today. And there's a lot of change that's happening. Some of it, your counterparts at your firm, they cover closely emerging forms of gaming, such as online and social and so on, and sports betting. But even within the realm of the more conventional casino floor, we see change accelerating. One area is in this effort to go cashless or contactless, to use the politically correct COVID-19 term. And there seems to be two approaches to this. One is the approach by the cash access companies like Every and Global Payments that you might call a universal approach, whereby they're going to have products that can be put onto any casino management system. The other might be what you call the more proprietary approach, which is where the manufacturers of those casino management systems have products they plug into their very own system. How do you see this space evolving?
Yeah, no, I think, in terms of kind of coming out of the COVID shutdown, what sort of new technologies or new gaming concepts are likely to gain traction or emerge from this. I think certainly cashless is one of those, especially on the land-based side. You're right. There's the cash access providers like Every and Sightline and those sorts of companies have their offerings, but you also have companies like IGT, Scientific Games, Konami, Aristocrat that are looking to provide their own kind of digital wallet and cashless options, and bundling those with their slot management systems. At the end of the day, in a lot of those cases, the suppliers still need to partner with like an Every or Sightline, a cash access provider to ultimately provide that solution. There's also a lot that I think has to be done on the casino operator side outside of the, engaging a supplier to provide that technology. I think on the infrastructure side, there needs to be some investment. There also has to be some changes in terms of how casino operators go about their business. So there's a lot of kind of pieces that have to be tied together. It's not a simple kind of flip the switch type scenario. That being said, there is a large push right now to move in that direction. So I do think you're going to see more and more of it. You also, the challenge is that you are always going to have a certain customer that likes cash. And so, the trick is, how do you move forward in that cashless direction while still kind of supporting that customer that still wants to use cash. And so there are some challenges in that, but I do think there's a lot of momentum moving in that direction of cashless. I do think you'll see more of that going forward.
What other technological innovations do you see in the near term in casino floors?
Yeah, I mean, I think that just from a product standpoint, kind of a product technology standpoint, electronic table games, they've kind of always been out there and have slowly have continued to gain traction. We've seen a ramp up in interest in those products, with the COVID shutdown, primarily centering around, obviously, you can remove a dealer, from the equation. But you also have these stadium setup options where you can kind of configure the terminals and the seats to space those out in a socially distant way. And so those products, I think, in many cases, kind of cater to kind of this new normal where customers might want to be spaced out a little bit more, but aren't necessarily comfortable sitting down at a live table, but still want to play table games. And so I think there's a lot of momentum behind ETGs right now as well.
One of to get away from technology per se and looking at the industry more broadly, we've gone through several evolutions. I remember the time when the entire casino floor was IGT, and there were a few other competitors out there, and the feeling was there had to be consolidation so that the smaller players can get the scale to compete against an IGT. And that happened. You had a consolidation. But the other thing that happened after that was you had this emergence of these smaller companies. So in a way, in some ways, you have as much or more competition today than you had 10 years earlier. How do you see this evolving? Who are the acquirers or the companies subject to be acquired? And, who's going to still be there 5 years from now?
Yeah, no, it's really fascinating. You're right. There was a round of consolidation, and there was some worry that there would be a lack of competition. But what we've seen is, like you mentioned, the emergence of companies like Every and AGS and Incredible Technologies and companies like that who've really been able to grab some attention and gain some traction on the floor. There's also several other companies like Blueberry out there and Eclipse. So there still are a fair amount of small companies out there, and usually kind of what you see is or what has happened traditionally is it's been kind of these private companies. Maybe they were family run or just private, and they the owner sells or you have a change in ownership, and they bring in a professional management team, and in many cases they took a look at the market and they say, all right, well, we're in this one state, why not get licensed in all these other states and offer our product to more customers. And in a lot of cases, these are like these class 2 companies, perfect example, or Every and AGS, where they kind of used that experience in tribal class 2 markets and expanded into tribal class 3 as well as commercial class 3. And we've seen a lot of success there. And I think what we've also seen is slot managers and slot directors like competition. So they're willing to give smaller companies a chance because they really do want them to be successful. So they have more choices. They don't ever want to go back to where one supplier is, 60 to 70% of their floor, because it really does put them in a tough spot in terms of leverage with their vendors. And frankly, the view is more competition, spurs better games, more, new gaming concepts, and is better for the overall industry. So I do think you'll see that continue. And I would, in all likelihood, I think you might continue to see acquisitions in the space as well. Once things kind of, I think there's a clear path to recovery. Valuations are still, well below where they were, in 2019 for the land-based suppliers. And so I do think there's some opportunities there for some consolidation or for certain suppliers. I think they will view it as an opportunity to, acquire some assets at pretty good prices to help grow their business over the next 2 to 3 years.
Okay. Well, we've covered a lot of territory in a short time, Todd. Anything else that points you'd like to touch upon?
No. I mean, I look again. I really appreciate being included in your interviews. Always been a big fan of Frank, what you guys have done with your business. I think guys do a great job at covering the industry. I love these interviews and just happy to be a part of it. So appreciate that very much.
Well, Todd, we appreciate what you've done in our relationship, and I might mention there's no question that you have created the industry standard for research and analysis and in your areas of expertise. So thanks again.
All right. Thanks, Frank. Appreciate it. Take care.